Okay, let's set the theme. Think back. Newcastle, big game, electric atmosphere.
Hmm.
And then Thierry Henry, normally so composed, right?
Right.
He absolutely gives young Leny Yoro a proper go, publicly.
Yeah, I remember that. It wasn't even for like a bad tackle or anything typical.
Exactly. It was because he got caught watching the linesman, apparently, instead of sticking with Harvey Barnes.
Yeah.
Henry looked genuinely furious. He properly let him have it.
It was quite something. And straight away you started thinking, okay, was that just, a one-off frustration?
Or something deeper.
Right. Like maybe a sign of a bigger issue with how young players are developing tactically. That whole football brain thing, their awareness.
Precisely. And that's really what we want to unpack today in this deep dive. Was Henry's outburst just a moment of heat, or did it actually flag a real concern about tactical smarts in young defenders?
So we're going to look at that specific moment again.
Yep. And then broaden out a bit, talk about what makes a tactically sound young defender.
And crucially, look at Yoro now. He's at Manchester United. How's he doing? Do the numbers, the stats, tell a different story now?
Basically, stats versus slams. Can his performance data silence those doubts Henry raised?
Yeah, we've been digging into the data from his time at United, looking at his tackles, interceptions, blocks, clearances, the core defensive stuff.
Trying to see if there's clear progress since that Lille game.
Exactly. See if the numbers show a player who's, well, learned from it. These metrics can tell you a lot.
And get this, our analysis also spotted something. Well, pretty subtle. A tactical tweak Euro seems to have made this season,
Oh, yeah.
specifically in how he positions himself for set pieces. It seems small, but the data suggests it's actually making a difference to his effectiveness.
Interesting. We should definitely break that down. What's he doing differently? And I guess, why does it seem to be working?
It all ties back to that idea of learning from criticism, right? How players like Euro develop that tactical intelligence, that football brain.
Absolutely. Can you turn a tough moment, like that public call out, into a stepping stone? Can you really sharpen that instinct to make the right call under pressure time after time? That's the core of it.
Okay, let's rewind then. Back to that Newcastle Lille flashpoint.
Huh?
Henry sees Euro looking towards the linesman, not tracking Barnes. From Henry's viewpoint, legendary striker.
Yeah.
What's the biggest red flag there?
Well, for an attacker like Henry, any hesitation, any divided attention from a defender, it's like blood in the water, isn't it?
Open invitation.
Exactly. A player like Barnes, he'll exploit that tiny gap in focus instantly. But it's not just the immediate danger, it's the knock-on effect. If one defender switches off, even for a second, it can pull the whole defensive line out of shape, creates holes, opportunities. Henry probably saw more than just one mistake.
He saw a potential pattern,
Hey.
a weakness.
Potentially. A vulnerability that top teams, top players will look to exploit again and again if it's there.
Right. And it wasn't like Euro was miles out of position, was it? It was that momentary lapse. It really drives home how mentally demanding it is for these young guys. It's so much more than just being fast or strong.
Oh, completely. At the elite level, physically and technically, most players are already incredibly gifted. The real difference maker often comes down to, well, tactical intelligence, mental discipline, that football brain again.
Reading the game.
Reading the game, anticipating, staying focused. That moment Henry highlighted. It wasn't about Yoro's physical ability, perhaps, but maybe a slip in concentration at a vital moment.
Yeah.
And it begs the question, doesn't it? How much of that awareness is just raw talent, and how much can you actually coach and develop through experience?
Which brings us nicely to the whole area of tactical decision-making for young defenders.
Yeah.
It's not just about reacting, is it?
No, not at all. It's anticipation. Understanding the flow, positioning yourself right, staying focused even when the action's on the other side of the pitch.
So what are the absolute must-haves, the core things they need to nail?
Okay, well, number one has to be positional awareness. Just knowing where you are relative to teammates, the ball, the opponent. Always. It's fundamental.
Right.
Then there's reading the game, seeing the patterns, anticipating passes, knowing when to step up, when to drop off. And then, maybe most relevant to the Henry incident, is that defensive discipline. Just locking onto your man, maintaining focus, ignoring the noise, the distractions.
Even in a massive, loud game.
Especially then. Coaches drill this stuff constantly, tactics boards, training exercises. But applying it under pressure in a real game,
Right.
That's the true test that takes time to develop.
And in those pressure cooker games, even a tiny mental slip gets amplified, doesn't it?
Yeah.
One moment of lost focus can cost your team big time.
Absolutely.
So how do coaches actually try and build that resilience, that tactical sharpness in young players?
It's a multi-pronged approach, really. A lot happens on the training pitch, obviously. Drills designed to simulate game situations.
Trying to make it second nature.
Exactly. Constant emphasis on communication, teamwork, individual roles within the system, and video analysis is huge now.
Showing them clips.
Yeah, breaking down plays, showing them what worked, what didn't, why it didn't, helping them visualize the consequences of decisions. Plus, learning from the older, experienced pros in the squad is massive.
Right.
But honestly, there's no substitute for just playing games. Getting thrown into those high-pressure situations, that's where the real learning happens, where that tactical understanding truly gets forged.
Okay, so let's jump forward. Leny Yoro, now playing for Manchester United, big club, intense league. We've been looking at his recent performances, specifically the stats. What are the numbers telling us about his development?
Well, it's interesting. The data we've looked at, it definitely shows a positive trend, a clear improvement in some key areas.
Like what?
Okay, so his tackling success rate, for instance, we've seen a noticeable jump there. He seems to be winning a higher percentage of his duels.
Which suggests more confidence, more decisiveness.
Exactly. Crucial for a center back. Any hesitation there gets punished. We're also seeing a pretty significant uptick in his interceptions.
So better reading of the game, anticipation.
Seems like it. He's breaking up play more effectively, stopping attacks before they properly develop. His blocking numbers are consistently solid too, putting his body on the line.
Give commitment.
Yeah, and clearances too. Dealing with danger, both aerial and on the ground, he seems effective there.
So if you just line up those stats, better tackling, more interceptions, solid blocks, effective clearances, it paints a pretty positive picture, doesn't it? A player growing, getting more effective.
It definitely does.
Does that start to build a case against those initial doubts?
Well, the stats certainly make a strong argument. They suggest he's, taken that feedback, maybe that tough moment, and really worked on his game, enhanced those defensive skills.
But stats aren't everything, right?
Exactly. Context is always key. You need to consider the opposition, the team's overall setup, the specific situation for each tackle or interception. Stats give you trends, valuable clues, but not the whole story.
Okay.
But yeah, on the face of it, the data points towards a really encouraging development path for him.
Now, you mentioned earlier this intriguing tactical tweak we spotted.
Mhm.
Something about set pieces. Tell me more. What's the detail there?
Right. This is quite fascinating, actually. It sort of speaks to his developing tactical brain. What our analysis suggests is that on defensive set pieces, Yoro's changed his starting position slightly,
Okay.
and he seems to be taking a more proactive approach, attacking the ball earlier.
So less focused purely on marking one guy.
It seems that way. Instead of just sticking rigidly to an opponent, whether it's man-to-man or in his zone, he appears to be positioning himself more strategically to intercept the flight of the ball itself, getting into those key areas before the ball arrives.
Ah, so anticipating the danger zone rather than just reacting to a player's movement
Mm.
and trying to cut it out at source.
Precisely. It lets him use his height, obviously, but also that improved anticipation we mentioned to clear crosses, disrupt headers, basically deal with the threat earlier.
That's smart.
It is. It shows a growing awareness, maybe a willingness to take more responsibility in those crucial moments. It suggests, coaching's getting through, but also that the player himself is thinking deeper about his role.
Yeah, that's the kind of subtle adjustment that most fans probably wouldn't even notice, but it can make a real difference to how solid a team is defensively. Shows he's thinking, anticipating, not just reacting.
Exactly that. And it links directly back to that football brain idea.
Yeah.
Learning, understanding your strengths, adapting your game to be more effective, that's development.
Which leads us perfectly to the final piece, really. Learning from criticism. Henry's words back then were sharp, public. How important is it for ambitious young players to actually absorb that kind of feedback, even if it stings, and use it to get better?
Oh, it's absolutely vital. Look, professional football is a tough world. You're always under scrutiny. Criticism comes with the territory from coaches, fans, pundits,
Everyone's got an opinion.
everyone. The players who make it to the very top are usually the ones with the mental strength to handle it. To process feedback constructively, identify where they need to improve, and actually use it as motivation. It takes real resilience, real self-awareness.
And it can't be easy when it's someone like Thierry Henry saying it,
Right.
right? On such a public stage. That's intense pressure for a young lad.
No doubt it's a massive challenge,
Mm-hmm.
but being able to compartmentalize that, to not let the negativity, if you see it that way, get you down, but instead to pull out the actual lesson, That's what separates the best.
And Yoro seems to have done that.
Well, based on what we're seeing, it certainly looks like it. Now, obviously, how criticism is delivered matters too,
Yeah, good point. Constructive versus destructive.
right? Different players respond differently.
Right.
But ultimately, if you want to reach the elite level, you have to develop that thick skin, that ability to learn from tough feedback. It's non-negotiable. And Yoro looks like he has that resilience.
Yeah, it seems that way. The stats improving, that smart tactical adjustment on set pieces, it all points to a player who's actively learning, adapting, finding ways to improve.
Definitely.
So let's try and pull it all together. We kicked off with that very public Henry criticism, that moment of apparent lost focus. That we looked at Yoro's numbers at Man United, clear improvement across key defensive stats.
Yep.
And we flagged that subtle but clever tactical shift in his set-piece defending. So the big question we asked at the start, stats versus slams. Does Henry's concern about that one lapse still hold weight?
Well, looking back, Henry's experience definitely identified a potential vulnerability, didn't it? A lapse in focus. But what's maybe more telling is the data, that tactical tweak. It strongly suggests a player who didn't just ignore it, but actively worked on those areas. It points to growing maturity, a deeper tactical understanding.
In wrapping this deep dive up, it makes you think about judging players, especially young ones. How much should we read into one snapshot moment, one mistake under pressure?
Yeah.
Is it always a sign of a fundamental flaw, or is it sometimes just, well, part of the learning curve on the way to becoming a top player?
That's a great question for anyone watching the game, actually. Finding that balance between reacting to what you see right now and keeping that longer-term perspective on a player's growth and potential.
Absolutely. Definitely some food for thought there. Leave a comment if you enjoyed this soccer talk and subscribe to the AI GOAT podcast for more epic soccer deep dives. Thanks for tuning in.